Welcome to the Real Crime Diary, Daily Dose of Crime. I'm your host, Sean Dupree. Today, we're diving into a case that gripped the nation in 2023, the mysterious disappearance and tragic death of Madeline Kingsbury. What began as a seemingly ordinary spring morning in Winona, Minnesota, would soon spiral into one of the most closely watched criminal investigations of the year. When a 26-year-old mother of two vanishes without a trace, leaving her children behind, questions begin to surface. But as we'll discover, sometimes the answers lie closer to home than anyone could have imagined. On March 31st, 2023, Madeline Kingsbury, a 26-year-old mother of two, vanished from her home in Winona, Minnesota. That morning started like any other. Madeline and her partner Adam Fravel dropped their children off at daycare around 8 a.m. According to initial reports, they returned to their shared home afterward, and that was the last time anyone would see Madeline alive. The relationship between Madeline and Adam was complicated. They lived together with their two young children, but their romantic relationship was described as on again, off again. Madeline, who worked at Mayo Clinic, was the primary breadwinner, while Adam Fravel was financially dependent on her. Friends would later reveal that Madeline had been planning to move on, possibly pursuing a new relationship, a detail that would become crucially important to investigators. When Madeline failed to pick up her children from daycare that afternoon, alarm bells immediately started ringing. This was completely out of character for a woman known to be a devoted mother. She hadn't shown up for work, wasn't responding to calls or messages, and her phone appeared to be off. Her disappearance left their tight-knit community in shock, as Madeline was described as responsible and reliable, someone who would never voluntarily abandon her children. As law enforcement began their investigation, one of the first crucial pieces of evidence came from Robert Albrecht, a neighbor who lived next door to Madeline and Adam. While smoking outside his home on the morning of her disappearance, he observed a slim figure walking around the property. Though he couldn't make out specific features or even recall the exact time of day, he was certain of one detail. The person he saw wasn't Adam Fravel. The investigation quickly intensified. By April 2nd, just 2 days after Madeline's disappearance, investigators had already placed a tracker on Adam Fravel's vehicle. The following day, law enforcement conducted their first search of the area that would later become significant, though at the time, they had no way of knowing its importance. Investigator Stephen Garrett's initial search of the area near Highway 43 proved frustrating. While he observed debris and downed treetops along the county roads during his sweep on an all-terrain vehicle, nothing caught his attention as suspicious. Looking back, this would become a critical missed opportunity, as Garrett never dismounted his ATV to conduct a more thorough ground search of the area. Law enforcement's early focus on Adam Fravel would later become a point of contention, with the defense arguing that investigators had tunnel vision and conducted a sloppy investigation. Meanwhile, surveillance footage emerged showing what appeared to be Madeline's van being driven from Winona to near Mabel on the day of her disappearance, a piece of evidence that would later prove crucial to the case. The search for Madeline Kingsbury came to a tragic conclusion on June 7, 2023. A Fillmore County Sheriff's deputy made the grim discovery after noticing an unusual swarm of flies near a culvert off Highway 43, just a few miles north of Mabel, Minnesota. What they found was devastating. Madeline's body, wrapped in a sheet, concealed under a pile of logs and debris, approximately an hour's drive from her home in Winona. The location of the discovery would prove to be particularly significant when paired with the surveillance footage presented by prosecutors. The video evidence allegedly showed Fravel driving Madeline's van from Winona to the Mabel area on March 31st, the very day she vanished. This crucial piece of evidence formed a cornerstone of the prosecution's case, connecting the accused to both the time and location of the crime. Prosecutors built their case around a compelling narrative of motive. They argued that Fravel, financially dependent on Madeline, was driven by jealousy over her plans to pursue a new relationship. While no direct witnesses to physical altercations were presented, the prosecution brought forward multiple individuals who testified to seeing concerning injuries on Madeline over time. The prosecution presented their case over 4 weeks, calling an impressive 68 witnesses to testify. In contrast, the defense team called just 5 witnesses total, focusing their efforts on challenging the prosecution's evidence as largely circumstantial and questioning the thoroughness of the investigation. The defense particularly emphasized the April 3rd search of the area where Madeline's body was eventually found, suggesting that the failure to locate her during the initial search pointed to potential gaps in the investigation. One of the most troubling aspects of this case lies in the pattern of injuries observed by those closest to Madeline Kingsbury. Multiple friends and family members stepped forward during the trial to recount instances where they had noticed bruising on Madeline's body, particularly around her neck and legs. This testimony painted a concerning picture of what may have been happening behind closed doors. Holly Stamshore, a close friend of Madeline's, provided particularly compelling testimony about two separate incidents. In 2018, she had questioned Madeline about bruising visible on her throat. At the time, Madeline had dismissed the injuries, attributing them to things getting out of hand in the bedroom. However, a more alarming incident occurred in 2021 when Madeline confided in Stamshore about a disturbing encounter while watching a documentary about Gabby Petito, a tragic irony that wouldn't be lost on anyone familiar with that case. According to Stamshore's testimony, Madeline revealed that during the viewing, Fravel had allegedly choked her from behind and forcefully pushed her onto a couch. This incident proved serious enough that Madeline took the children and sought refuge at her parents' home for several days. The prosecution argued that these incidents weren't isolated events, but rather part of an escalating pattern of domestic abuse. Evidence so significant that it formed the basis for one of the 4 murder charges against Fravel. The defense attempted to minimize these allegations, suggesting alternative explanations for the bruising and questioning the context of these encounters. However, the consistent nature of the testimony from multiple witnesses about visible injuries over time presented a troubling timeline of potential abuse leading up to Madeline's disappearance. The defense team's strategy in this case has centered around creating reasonable doubt by challenging the thoroughness of the police investigation and offering alternative narratives to the prosecution's evidence. Attorney Zach Bauer has consistently argued that law enforcement developed tunnel vision, focusing too narrowly on Adam Fravel as their primary suspect while potentially missing other leads. A key witness for the defense was Ryan Fravel, Adam's brother, who provided testimony that painted a markedly different picture of the defendant. Despite their 12-year age gap, Ryan described maintaining a close relationship with his brother throughout their lives. He testified that he had never seen Adam display anger issues and, more importantly, emphasized the loving relationship Adam had with his children, describing how they would look to him for both comfort and guidance. The defense also brought forward Robert Albrecht, a neighbor who provided testimony that could potentially contradict the prosecution's timeline. Albrecht stated he witnessed a slim figure walking on the property the morning of Madeline's disappearance, a figure he was certain wasn't Adam Fravel. Though his memory of specific details was admittedly hazy, this testimony introduced an element of uncertainty about who was present that day. Perhaps most significantly, the defense highlighted potential oversights in the initial investigation. Through questioning Houston County Sheriff's deputies, they revealed that law enforcement had actually searched the area where Madeline's body was eventually found, but months before its discovery. Investigator Stephen Garrett admitted to searching the area on an ATV without dismounting to conduct a more thorough examination, a detail the defense used to suggest possible investigative negligence. The defense's careful construction of alternate possibilities, combined with their emphasis on law enforcement's potential missteps, appears designed to plant seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds about the certainty of the prosecution's case. As we approach the final stages of this gripping trial, the proceedings have taken several significant turns. After calling a total of 68 witnesses over 4 intense weeks, the prosecution rested their case. The defense, in contrast, presented just 5 witnesses before resting, with perhaps the most notable development being Adam Fravel's decision not to take the stand in his own defense. The trial has experienced an unexpected development with one juror's dismissal. This particular juror had a pre-planned cruise and expressed concerns that her judgment might be compromised by her desire to expedite the proceedings. Fortunately, the court's foresight in selecting 5 alternate jurors at the trial's onset has ensured this setback won't derail the proceedings. With both sides having presented their evidence, closing arguments have been scheduled for November 6th. This delay from the initial timeline gives both legal teams additional time to prepare their final presentations to the jury. These closing arguments will be crucial as they represent each side's last opportunity to weave together the extensive testimony and evidence presented over the past month into a compelling narrative that will resonate with the jury. The trial, which has garnered national attention and captivated the local community, now moves toward its climactic conclusion. The jury will soon face the weighty task of determining whether the prosecution has proven beyond reasonable doubt that Adam Fravel is responsible for Madeline Kingsbury's death. As we wait for the verdict in this haunting case, I can't help but wonder, what was the true nature of Adam and Madeline's relationship? Did law enforcement's intense focus on Fravel as a suspect help or hinder the investigation? And perhaps most importantly, will this trial bring the closure and justice that Madeline's family and friends so desperately seek? These questions and many more will likely remain in our minds long after the verdict is read. If you're as fascinated by cases like this as I am, you'll want to check out our curated collection of true crime books. Just follow the link in the description. Join me tomorrow for another compelling case from the Real Crime Diary, where we'll explore another story that challenges our understanding of human nature and justice. Until then, keep watching, keep questioning, and remember, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Real Crime Diary. I'm your host, Sean Dupree. If you tuned in last time, we had a deep dive into the disturbing history of power abuse across different eras, looking at the connection between dominance, control, and how it plays out even today. We touched on scandals from the past and compared them with some modern-day examples, showing how these patterns of abuse, unfortunately, persist. One of the most insightful tools we've explored to understand this is my book, Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's not just a historical account, but an interdisciplinary approach to understanding why this keeps happening. We draw from history, philosophy, and modern case studies to explain how figures like Dominique Pellico, Harvey Weinstein, and others have exploited their positions of power for their own gain, often protected by the very systems meant to stop them. Recap of last interaction. In our last live stream, we discussed how libertinism, philosophically introduced by figures like Marquis de Sade, has shaped the way power and pleasure have been entangled throughout history. This concept ties directly into how figures like Weinstein operated, as we saw parallels between de Sade's fictional characters and the way powerful men manipulated their victims in real life. You guys had some amazing comments, asking how societal structures have allowed these behaviors to go unchecked for so long. It's a crucial question, and one that the book addresses deeply. Why this book is valuable. Now, what's powerful about Power, Pleasure, and Pain is its ability to break down these historical patterns and link them to the present. You're not just reading about ancient Rome or Enlightenment philosophy, you're seeing how these ideologies are alive today. The book uncovers how sexual violence and control have been systematically woven into the fabric of societies from ancient times right up to the modern era. It's about understanding not just the individual predators, but the systems that protect them, whether it's in royal courts, religious institutions, or today's corporate and entertainment worlds. Through these historical lenses, we also explore movements like #MeToo that are beginning to dismantle these structures. The fight for justice is far from over, but as the book demonstrates, we are in the midst of a cultural shift where legal reforms are finally addressing these long-standing issues. It's more than a history lesson. It's a guide to understanding and supporting change today. What's next? If you want to dive deeper, I suggest picking up Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's available now, and trust me, it will change the way you think about power, pleasure, and control. We've even got some exclusive content coming up on the channel where we'll be exploring the book's case studies in even more detail, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the Real Crime Diary so you don't miss any updates. Let's keep this conversation going, because understanding the past is key to changing the future.